Hey folks, welcome to That Photo Feeling. I'm your host, Andy McSweeney. How do you feel about your photography? Good to great to awesome, I hope, or at least on its way there. And who knows, maybe today's episode will help you get down that road. That's because we're talking with advertising photographer, photography mentor and consultant, social media marketer Michael Lee, Canada born, Hong Kong based, someone I've gotten to know on Clubhouse over the last few months, and a deep pleasure to sit down finally on the podcast and have a chat with him. And what a chat we had, boys and girls. 2 hours. One of those long sessions I like to do every now and then. Funnily enough, and you'll hear me refer to it a couple times over the episode, Michael successfully avoided sharing his story, so good on him. But as a byproduct of that, thankfully, we all prospered because we got nattering and chatting about all kinds of things photography that I think might be able to help you out if you're feeling some moves and grooves on your photo side of things, my friend. So, he says, grabbing his notes, we start off with a little bit of Clubhouse for Photographers, talking about social media after that, some business sense. We even dip into NFTs. Oh, not to mention assisting, not owning a camera as Michael does, yet being a successful advertising photographer. And a couple other things that are on the notes, but I won't bore you about as we are in the opening moments of the show, my friends. So why tease it when I can show it? Maybe that's what she said. Let's get to it. I'll be back at the end of the episode with a little bit of natter, but that's only if you can take it after 2 hours of excellent chit-chat with Michael Lee. We were talking about a Clubhouse addiction.
Yeah, so we can finish talking about Clubhouse first. So anyway, it's a great way just to meet new people. But we've talked about this before on how to find a way to justify our time that we invest into Clubhouse. And as you know, Clubhouse is not really designed to monetize or help you make money, even though people have found ways of doing it. And I think we talked about having to find a way to make some money out of it just to justify the time that we spend, right? Because we are spending a huge amount of time on it. And to not get some return, whether directly or indirectly, it's hard to swallow that. So, and we enjoy it so much that it's still, we need more than just the enjoyment sometimes, because it's just too much time that we spend. So I've found, I'm starting to find ways to do some consulting through Clubhouse, which you know about already. And it's helping a little bit, here and there. It's not enough to, pay the rent or anything like that, but it's better than nothing. And again, we are on as professionals to, at least in my case, to help others who are just starting out in this industry, and also to learn about other things as well beyond photography, because Clubhouse there's a room for absolutely anything, right?
It's an amazing resource for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So anyway, it's a good way to spend time when you have time. And I find myself nowadays trying to squeeze it in between errands or in between tasks. It's just something to do. At the very least, go into a room and just listen without speaking is just some background noise. Like, I call it radio mode.
Yep.
Right. But I think you and I are very used to being on stage and speaking, because right from the get-go, I kind of forced myself to get up on stage and start speaking. And because I found that, as a social media marketer, that's something I do on the side. I know that, social media is about socializing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in order to socialize, you have to speak, right? So, and so you won't gain an audience or a following, or people just won't know who you are unless you speak up, right? Because we don't know who the audience people are most of the time. And if you want to be known, you have to say something, right? And it's totally fine if you don't, but you might have a different objective for being on social media.
Yeah. Well, it's a mindset, isn't it? Even if you step back from the objective, even if you're there purely to learn, you just might be someone who's happy hanging in the audience. There's not
For
always a
sure.
need to be on stage, even if it's a quiet stage where you can just hang out, if you will.
For sure. And I think there are tons of people who use social media as just for consumption,
Mm,
right? So they're consuming content. But as a marketer, I'm all on the other side. I'm part of the side that creates the content, right?
absolutely.
I'm part of the side that creates content for people to engage with, right? So I totally understand that some people just are happy just to sit back and consume, which is fine.
Yeah,
But to be on the other side is quite a different story. It's quite a different mindset,
yeah.
right? And first and foremost, you have to reach out to people, and you have to break through that social barrier, and take the first step and say the first word, and to engage people. Because if you don't say anything, they won't say anything back to you.
And the room dies. Or at least you're not making any progress as part of the mindset and objectives you have there. And it is
Yeah.
normal as photographers. There is that part of the job that's about marketing, just flat out. Let's call it what it is.
Hmm.
I'd be happy if I had the magic camera and I could just hand in stuff to editorial and make my money and be on my way. But that's not the
Yeah.
reality. And it never really was to an extent. If you weren't
Hmm.
working social media, because there wasn't none in the day, you were working portfolios to editors, you were working, geez, 5 different circuits to whatever could get you a living in this. So that's good. That's good that you're being sensible with this whole behemoth that's been built up on Clubhouse for photographers. Because otherwise, I mean, how can you justify the time, like you say?
Yeah. I mean, it's great that there's a way that I found, and it's not just me, other people I've known have taught me how to monetize on Clubhouse. And it's, at first I thought it was kind of a scammy thing to solicit business, especially in a community where that's built on free advice, free education.
Yeah, which is part of the strangeness for us. We're both consultants towards photographers.
Yeah.
So that's part of the
So,
work mix. Please.
and of course, in the app itself, everyone is exchanging ideas and advice
Yeah.
and information for free, right? That's what it's built on. So to come out and say, "Oh, by the way, I'm charging for this now," is kind of a sensitive issue.
Yeah. It's tacky too, especially if you just threw it out like that.
Yeah. So the way I've decided to work around that is, I mean, if it's on Clubhouse, anything I say is absolutely for free, right? And especially the fact that the country that I live in, we don't have access to getting paid on directly on Clubhouse yet.
Of course.
Only for now, as of May or June of 2021, um, we don't have the payment function set up in Hong Kong yet. So we don't have a choice that we cannot get paid, period, on Clubhouse. But I would say that if you're asking me a question and I give you an answer and some advice on Clubhouse, it's usually limited to, one question, one answer,
Mm.
maybe a couple of minutes. That's it, right? How much can I offer you as one person, like a one-to-one on Clubhouse? Not very much, right? So just due to the nature of the rooms and the way they're set up, and there are tons of people waiting to talk, there's only so much I can give each person.
Of course. And a lot of this comes down to the individual beyond 2 minutes, even if you wanted to.
Right. So I basically differentiate my consulting to my Clubhouse freebie advice
Mm.
by saying that if you hire me for an hour on consulting, you have my undivided attention, and we have 1 hour's worth of time to talk about, you know, solving your problems.
Yeah.
So that's way more in depth than anything that Clubhouse can offer. And that's worth money.
Yeah.
Simple as that, right? So I can say, yeah, on Clubhouse, I don't mind giving out this, information, but I'm so limited by time that I can't really go in depth of any sort.
Yeah.
Right? I can give you just some, very general advice, but nothing super deep. Like you can't ask me to review your portfolio on Clubhouse,
Yeah.
because, but that's a very common question. A
Mhm.
lot of people is, hey, can you check out my work? And I'm like, yeah, yeah, but not here
Yeah.
because it'll take way too much time, right? So people might think it's an easy question to answer, but it's not because when I review someone's work, I go really deep into it, right? And I try to give them the best piece of advice as possible. But I can't just say it's great or it's terrible. Well, I probably could say that on Clubhouse because that's all the time that I'm allowed to use. But how much does that help you? Not much, right?
And for
Yeah. So
for proper learning and feedback for that part of the cycle, you got to go one on one properly beyond something like social media of any kind. How can you really
yeah.
connect with a person, find out their objectives, their goals? And I mean, that certainly we can talk about plenty. That's why I say it's a very loose show where we just kind of see where the conversation takes us. But I like,
Mhm.
man, that you're sharing this because this is also, well, I talked about Clubhouse for photographers. The last episode, a couple of episodes was about that. And Ryan helped me with that. And Ryan's made no bones of it that he's partly there for the business side of things. And I think as long as you just have a reasonable and respectful attitude to the people that you're with on Clubhouse, no one minds.
Mhm.
Disrespectful on your side is going, oh, and by the way, contact me for a 1 hour one-on-one so we can really get into it in that tacky salesman way, or just giving the information, doing what you're doing there, which is sharing, which I think ultimately is where your heart is in this. Because
Yeah.
like me, I can tell that you love to just talk about this stuff and like fix the problem through pooling minds.
Yeah.
Uh, so with that attitude, whether it's Clubhouse or otherwise, I think you're good to go. And this is the kind of attitude in the photography community that's hopefully going to grow and prosper from all of us coming together. Because we are fundamentally, since we're down this track for a minute, globally in particular, and you've talked a lot about this, we're a fractured community to be like together on pricing, on quality of the job, what is actually a photographer to an extent, like in the
Mhm.
professional definition. So to
Mhm.
me, man, and feel free to throw in on this because I know you're passionate about it, but it's great that Clubhouse is giving us a little peek backstage to all of our worlds and a place to like put all this information together uh, towards feeding my optimism that we can do better out of these things. How do you feel? Do you feel that this platform has actually helped photographers substantially in the way of like getting together, whether it's knowledge or like proper rates and such?
I think that it has helped everyone, including myself, just to know the breadth um, of and the depth of differences, different types of photographers out there. Because I think everyone who's in a certain niche or certain industry or certain location, they only know photography as they see it, and they're probably in some sort of a bubble. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
is operating in some sort of a bubble.
Even in the
Uh,
cities, absolutely.
yeah, some
Yeah.
depending on where you are and what industry you're in, for photography.
Yeah.
So some of those bubbles are very small, and some of them are bigger. But everyone is in some sort of a bubble. That's my point.
Mm.
And I think Clubhouse bursts all those bubbles and makes everyone realize that there is way more about photography beyond their own little bubble. And it's a realization that I've come to see where I've gotten to meet all different types of people, photographers in all walks of life, in all parts of the world, and especially in every level, whether they're starting out or seasoned pros and
Yep.
everyone in between, right? So you just get to meet all the different types and different levels. So that's refreshing because sometimes when you're working within your own little bubble, you're used to talking to the same type of people, and you have certain expectations from one another, which can be comforting,
Yeah.
but can also get quite a bit stale.
There's no fresh
right?
blood in there.
Yeah, there's just
Yeah.
no differences in opinion because we all are, we can probably find ways to work very efficiently amongst each other.
Hmm.
But sometimes it's just good to see something from a completely different perspective. And, I'm in Hong Kong, someone in, you know, Bruges, Belgium can give me a completely different idea. Someone who I probably would have never met outside of the app. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, thanks, Andy. That was a good point. I never thought about that.
Mm.
So it's these differences in perspective that sometimes I don't even realize that can can just hit me in the head, and it's immediate because we are talking live on the app, right? It's unlike other social media apps where you leave a comment, you wait for them to reply. It could take a day, a week, or never. But here, you ask a question or you say something and you get an immediate response by other people. It's the best solution for this new generation of social media users who are lacking in patience.
Very much.
You cannot get a better response, a faster response than this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oops, sorry about that.
Nah,
I
don't
should
worry.
mute my phone.
That's all good. I should have warned you. That's how casual we take it here, mate. But thanks for not picking up. And you make an excellent point. This app has really connected people as far as just like that immediate response, and that's what I find amazing. And also, like you mentioned, the top to bottom that we're seeing of our entire medium here. I mean, even some of the old school photographers, they're being talked into installing the app and giving a talk sometimes. And as
Yeah.
you've seen, like Peter Hurley does a regular show. He's way up there in the game. He doesn't have to hang out on Clubhouse, but he seems
Mhm.
happy to spend some time. And there's actual, I think, communities building here that might actually be part of where Clubhouse, I think, evolves still in a reasonable shape of what it is for live conversations and regular hangouts. But I think it'll be more niche in specific communities. I can
Mhm.
somehow see photographers being a part of that, whether it's Clubhouse or whatever takes over. But even within whatever takes over, I could see Clubhouse being a little more popular with us because a lot of us are into something a little more niche and different just by nature. It's part of the
Mhm.
job, really, isn't it?
Mhm. Mhm. I mean, like I found out through Clubhouse and through talking to other people, especially the younger generation, their perception of what photography is quite new. I wouldn't say I disagree with it, but it is different from the way how I learned it.
Mm.
And I think the newer generation, a lot of photography is in many ways connected to social media. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It wouldn't in their minds it would be difficult to have photography exist at all without the presence of social media, right?
Yeah.
So and of course when you and I both learned photography, well, social media wasn't even around back then, so we have a very different approach to what photography is. And sometimes it's very interesting to hear how they think about shooting in a way that benefits them on social media, because it seems to me that is one of the highest goals, and is to do well on social media via their photography.
Yeah.
And I mean, in one part of my mind I see a certain danger there, because when you're shooting specifically for social, um, it may not benefit you as a photographer. It may benefit you as an if you're somehow an influencer on social media,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but that means that you have another agenda,
Yeah.
and if you can you're trying to satisfy that agenda, which is fine, right? That could be just a part of that solution. But if you're first and foremost trying to grow as a photographer, the in, quote unquote importance of social media may get in your way of becoming a better photographer.
Yeah. which is something
Yeah.
we've heard in Clubhouse more than a few times. People frustrated. We had it just in the room I was running today, and you were there, I believe. People talking
Hmm.
about their frustration with reactions on social media. Don't know if you heard the guy who does insect photography, really macro, beautiful stuff. I didn't see it. He didn't have it in his profile, so I couldn't click over. But he said that one of his frustrations is when he does something that's less than the formula he's cracked to beautiful. Like literally, he does it within a formula. It works perfectly. Gets tons of like, the insects are beautiful. This, that, and the other. He deviates from that formula. Nothing. And
Right.
and he's torn because he doesn't care. This is passion photography. It's not work. But at the
Hmm.
same time, he's noticed that it's opened up a dialogue to how insects and such aren't super disgusting and always to be frightened about.
Yeah. So like he's probably like using the likes or the lack of likes as a guide on how he shoots, which
Precisely.
is
And he's
which is
getting
terrible. Right?
it is and it isn't. He also has community comments. So people are saying, like, wow, I never saw a cockroach this way. I can see the beauty now, that kind of base response. And when he deviates from the formula, he'll get more negative responses or less likes or less engagement. But he says
So
he wouldn't care if it wasn't for the fact that when he gets it right, people who are death scared of insects say, this is beautiful and it's changed my life and perception towards them.
oh, okay, okay. Well, I think as long as he's really you know, shooting the way he shoots because it's the most natural way he knows how to do it.
Well, it's a formula at this point. He's cracked and figured out that when he shoots a certain way, certain development on the colors, contrast, whatever, it hits a note of warmth
Hmm.
towards the insects.
Hmm. Okay. As long as it's just all coming from him, right? And
Yeah.
it's not because he's influenced by the engagement somehow.
He is because of the fact it makes people less freaked out about insects. And he cares about that passionately. Otherwise, he just wouldn't worry about any comments either way. So this is
Hmm.
just like how it's a very specific case, if you will. I mean, there's certainly damage cases we could talk about from social media, but in his case, it frustrates his work because he can't get creative, do things out of this certain routine and formula. Otherwise, the overall cause of the insects is injured.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where I see the danger because you end up, you're not being truthful to yourself. You're letting other people's reactions influence the way you shoot. Well, and that's the biggest danger I see because no one's being really truthful to their own craft, and
Yeah.
hence, the starving artist moniker is alive and very well. But there's a certain truth to it because I think that every artist has to stick to their guns and do what they think is the most natural for them. Um, Whether you become successful or not is purely by chance. You know, Andy Warhol became successful purely by chance, I think, anyway. He did what he did, and nothing will change that. Nothing, right? He got famous for it. That's a bonus. But there are tons of great artists out there who don't have that luck, right? Most of them don't. So, but they're still great artists. Hence the starving artist.
That's it. And then social media is basically a reflection of that, the starving for likes artist.
Yeah, but if you're starving for likes, then likes become what you are striving for. Um, then you may start shooting in a certain way just to get the likes, right? And that if that's completely natural, comes out naturally for you, then that's fine. I'm okay with that, right? Because you're still being truthful to your art. But if you have to change any of that just to get the likes, yeah, I don't agree with that at all, right?
Same.
Yeah, because hey, in the end, social media isn't that important. And you know what? Most of the biggest photographers that I know of are not on social media. They don't need to be.
And if they are, they're throwing their post down and walking out of the room.
I mean, they don't care. They don't care what people think at all.
Yeah.
They don't need to, because the most important reactions for in their point of view is their high-end clients. As long as they are happy, that's fine. And their opinion is the most important thing, not the social media world. They can care less about those people's opinions.
Yeah. And if they're really, really, really lucky, or they've got the right business relationships, they're barely caring about what the client does because the client is there for what they do. It
Yeah.
gets trickier in the commercial space, obviously, but it does happen. And fine art, certainly, that's what it's all about, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't think a fine art client or a big time brand client really cares how well how many followers you have on social media. If they're hiring for global campaigns, huge budgets, the photographers they hire are not the influencers that you see on social media,
Not for a
right?
billboard campaign, that's for sure.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Those brands may still hire influencers
Yeah.
for a different type of campaign, right? But that same brand would hire another type of photographer for a global brand campaign, for example. It's different types of content creators, basically. So the type of photographers that are hired for the big global campaigns are usually the ones that have little to no social media presence. Um, they are hired for their specific way of seeing the world. In a nutshell, it's just they're hired for their opinion,
Mm.
really, of photography. And when you're hired for your opinion, it's actually I think it's a very um, it's something that cannot be easily negotiated in terms of pricing, right? If you're hired for a specific lighting technique, for example,
Mm.
that can be easily commoditized. Lighting technique or a certain way of doing colors, those are commoditizable.
Well, with all due respect, and as proof of doing it right, Hurley does that through the Headshot Crew, and his whole teaching method, where it can be essentially commoditized and franchised. So you're talking
Yes.
about a bit of a signature that you can actually just figure out to a formula and move forward with. But
Yeah,
then on the other side of things, what do these brands look for? Are they looking for something that isn't easily reproduced? Is that what you say?
correct. And that is the creative, right? Basically, they are those types of photographers are hired for their unique way of seeing the world, and that cannot be negotiated. You cannot hire another photographer and say, think like this guy, but charge less. You can't, because everyone thinks a different way. So when you're hired for that type of thinking, you can kind of just set your own price because no one can compete with you. But if you're hired for something that's more tangible, something that's more of a commodity, then people can negotiate your rate down, because a certain way of lighting or a certain method or formula can be reproduced, and someone out there can do it for cheaper if they know how to reproduce it.
Absolutely.
But your creative ability, your conceptualization of ideas, and just the way you see as a photographer, those things cannot be commoditized, and that's why they are valued higher. in my opinion. So it really depends how you position yourself as a photographer, really. If you can figure out a way to position yourself where people hire you for the way you see the world, the way you think, then I think there's less competition for you. You're doing yourself a favor if you can position yourself that way. And all the top end photographers do that. They don't have any particular special lighting technique or any technical thing that they're amazing at. They don't but they do have a mental set of skills or a way of seeing the world that no other photographer has.
Hmm.
And those things have high value. And that's why they get paid the big bucks, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And on top of it, if I may add, just they'll also integrate all that into the basic business sense, either by learning those basic functions and tools you have to do business, or having a team around them in one way or another, right?
Yeah, I think most of them don't have very good business skills.
Not intuitive, is it, with us?
Like they spend all of their energy into creating, right?
Yeah.
And the whole business thing is like, they just hire people to do that for them.
Yeah.
Um, Either because they suck at it themselves, or it's just they've done it long enough that they can afford to hire people to help them out. And so most of the big photographers out there have agents, or managers to help them sort through the business stuff, so they can just focus even more on their art and produce even better art that way because their mind is free from the commerce.
Precisely, and that's good art and good business, which feed each other in many ways. So that should be the ideal if you can put yourself 100% into the part you're strong at with the creative and thinking and the perspective side of things, and then you have one way or another somebody handling the business end of it, even down to the networking and handshaking, contract signing, if you can.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I know, like, it's not just photographers, like the world's best designers, the world's best architects, they all work the same way. When they are so high end that they don't um, they don't think in terms of business. They just think in terms of their craft. That's the only way their minds work. So they need other people that they hire to help um, extract as much money from their high-end, level of art that no one else has. They're taking it, they're leveraging their incredible skills as an artist to make the most amount of money. And it's justifiable. They damn well should make the most money because they're such amazing artists,
Of course.
right? Why not, right? So that's a win-win situation, I find.
Unless you're
It's
tacky with it, Andy Warhol.
Yeah, right. But I think it's a complete waste if you're so talented, yet you can't find a way to leverage that commercially.
Yeah. And that's where the
You know,
starving artist comes in. They've got all that skill set except that ability to plug into others or one way or another figure out how to pay the bills.
I think there's tons and tons of amazing artists out there who no one knows about. So, I mean, my uncle, who is an architect, um, for many years, quit the business. He was an architect working, in one. I guess I can't remember the architecture firm, but it got to a point where he had to leave the industry and end up teaching architecture, only because he couldn't handle the business side of it.
Hmm. I see.
Right. So it's out there in all shapes and sizes, but it's definitely a waste of potential talent that the world needs to see.
Yeah. Especially when it comes to art, especially nowadays. I mean, this is the stuff that nurtures the soul. So that
Yeah.
it's a pain, it's a shame when that stuff gets lost to the ages or bad circumstance. Oh.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, Andy, this whole NFT thing, it values the commerce more than the art.
Wow,
I
man, you'll
find.
talk about NFTs to avoid talking about your story. I love where this is going down, please.
Hey,
I
you said anything goes, so anything here goes nothing.
want to hear how you feel about NFTs, those beautiful non fungible tokens. Look it up if you've never heard it before. Go for it, brother.
Yeah, so I find that the NFT world, because like all you hear about is how much money this piece made or that piece made. It's all based on money, money, money. And but where's the art and how good is the art? It's no one really talks about how good the art is, in the NFT world. They only talk about how much money's being made.
Funny that.
So I'm just saying this as a flip side to the coin. On one hand, just now we were talking about how important the art is.
Yeah.
This is the flip side of that coin, where the art isn't that important, but the money to be made is. So that's why I never got into NFTs. I think that once you value the money more than the art, then it's not really art anymore. Then you might as well be just trading stocks. The art itself has become just a stock. It's not real. There's no value in the art, really. Well, there's a lot of monetary value apparently, but no other value.
Well, this is where you're doing the art that I do give Warhol credit to. You're doing the art of making money and commoditizing your art into a brand, into a product, into something that at the end of the day is about making cash because you don't want to hang out on Wall Street, for example. And NFTs do strike me as that too. This is where we
Yeah,
get into the business side of art. Like they say in the movies, it's show business. And
yeah,
in art, it's double even.
yeah. I mean, there's that there. It boggles my mind how much money gets thrown around in this world, this NFT world, um, based on the visuals, on the art itself. Like it's a very disproportionate proposition. And then on the flip side of that, on Clubhouse, you hear about photographers, barely even able to charge $100 for a shoot, who are struggling to charge more than that. And, I'm like, wow, like on one hand, this guy can sell an NFT for, a few million or something like that for a piece of art that, come on, is it really worth that much money? Like, come on, right? And on the other hand, you got this guy who's just struggling to make $100.
Yeah.
That's how subjective this art world is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it again comes to the business of it. I'm sure you've looked into NFTs and seen how they're made. It costs money to make an NFT. It's like a Bitcoin. You have to have a machine turning around the math and the processes to validate it as crypto.
Yeah, I've learned as much as I wanted to learn about it. I can't say that I know a lot about it because like apparently there's so much to learn about this stuff. I mean, I was just yesterday, just out of curiosity, watched a video on how to mine your own Ethereum, and in the end, it's not worth it. Like mining your own crypto is completely waste of time and money.
Depending, unless you're in a really cheap electricity country and you can get your hand on electronics for cheap, yeah, it's not worth your while whatsoever. Not these days. Yeah.
Yeah, because apparently the electricity, the costs of to power your computer, it was going to cost more than what you make from it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a way to harness renewable energy into making this work, but then of course you have to factor in the investment, the initial investment to, I don't know, build a wind farm or a solar farm or something. That's going to cost a heap of investment um, that you end up owing. Um, and I don't know how long is it going to take to just break even for that initial investment from the Bitcoin that you mine. It's probably just not worth it in the end.
Well, this is not. not for Bitcoin, maybe for an NFT, especially if you're an established name. But getting back to the NFTs, especially since we're there, this is where you see the dilution of art getting out properly, as far as I see it, because then the business side takes in a name. And I'm not knocking anyone's art who's making money out of this. Don't get me wrong, but there is mechanisms within the art traditionally, as it happens, and now with NFTs, that are favoring established artists much more than up and coming or, well, obviously no name artists. And that's going to be the logical progress of Darwinism for this thing. But if you start throwing NFTs that out of nowhere are going to make someone 10 million, that's throwing the whole industry out of whack even further. Wouldn't it be? I mean,
Yeah. So.
that's just the economics suddenly getting these weird injections from kind of like Bitcoin, something that, I mean, NFTs are different than Bitcoin because you take ownership of the art as far as the copyright goes in most cases, but it's only so tangible and it's only worth as much as somebody wants to pay for it.
Yeah, I think most of the people who are buying it now are just people who have so much cash that they don't know what else to do with, right? Like literally people who can easily afford to lose this type of money that they're spending on NFTs. Like they don't care, they don't see it as an investment. They're just thinking, whatever, a few million, that's nothing. It's a drop in the bucket. Yeah, sure, why not, right? That's the kind of buyers that are out there right now, but not the smartest decisions makers, for business.
Hmm.
Just people with just way too much money. And eventually, I think people will smarten up and realize that, well, you know what? If I'm going to spend this kind of money, well, as always, I'm going to look for my ROI. Is it worth it? Right? Is it going to make me more money down the road? Because they're not buying these NFTs just for the sake of, owning a piece of art. It's not a Picasso, right? It's not valued the same way.
Hmm.
Um, Even though the way it's structured makes it appear that it could be as scarce as a one-off, right? Like a limited edition. You can structure it that way, but still, it doesn't hold. It's not seen in the same way as a real piece of like physical art. So I can't see it having that sustained value over time as a Mona Lisa or anything like that can.
It would be difficult, even from an established artist. I mean, how can you justify that when you can't necessarily very easily hang it in a gallery? What I have seen, though, as part of the counterpoint from the little bits that I've researched this, I mean, like you've said, and I think I hope I'm making clear, we're not at all qualified NFT people. We've only gone so far and put up with so much information on this. But what I do like the idea with NFTs is that you can actually pair it with something physical. So when you hand over the sale of it, you just basically load up a USB key and then put it in a nice piece of art. And I guess you could extend that to a photo. I mean, a USB key, if you strip it down, it's just basically a circuit board. You could integrate that into a photo print mounted on a rack and say that's the photo and that's the ownership, and you can scan it for all the extra stuff. Then I see, then I could see it making sense and going, okay, at least now I've got something that I can like grab on the way out of the house while it's on fire because this will help rebuild.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Okay. Maybe. Like, I think just we're just so used to placing more value on something that is tangible.
Yeah. Well, that's also us. You, my friend, are also like me. You're over 40. So we remember the time of analog cameras, very little internet unless you were a computer enthusiast, et cetera, et cetera. Eh?
Yeah, I mean, I've I started using the internet when I think I was in my late teens, and back then, I mean, we were still using dial-up modems, so I had to hog over your phone line at 56.6 kilobytes. Was it kilobytes?
Yeah.
Something really slow, okay? And most of the internet back then was just text based. There was no graphics because graphics took up too much bandwidth. But yeah, so I think we were the part of the generation that saw the internet grow from nothing to what it is today, right? Whereas some of the younger generation just grew up assuming, the internet has always existed, and their first experience with the internet is a very sophisticated internet compared to what we were used to, right?
Absolutely.
So in a way, it's good to know where it came from, how it started, and be a part of that evolution. And also to see, how it's going to grow into the next 20 years or so, right? Because there's still tons of room for advancement.
Yeah, it's still very young relatively. That's part of why things like social media are still with bumps and caution signs here and there. And I think that's
Yeah,
part of why Clubhouse also takes off, not in the least to go back to that particular topic, but it does strip it all back down to the human voice and basic human manners at the end of the day.
yeah. I mean, like if you understand internet, you understand social media, and vice versa. Because when you think about it, the internet was originally designed to connect people, right? It's exactly the same reason how social media came to be. Social media it's basically the internet with a UI wrapped in front of it, right? Just an easier way for people to interface with the internet, right? And but it's all about just reaching out and connecting with other people. So, and just made easier that way and faster nowadays with a better bandwidth and everything. But
Hmm.
if you think about it in those terms, I don't think that we'll see the internet ever going away. It will only improve, only get bigger, only become a bigger part of our lives. Knowing that is almost a certainty.
Hmm.
I mean, it's almost a guarantee that anything to do with the internet will always go get better over time, right? And they'll just come out with bigger and better ways of communicating with one another.
On the
You know?
delivery side, the
Yeah,
human social side, I'm going to take a wait and see, having seen troll culture and stuff come up.
yeah, sure. I mean, everyone's saying that the next big wave is going to be voice based,
Yeah.
right? So, if you just like Siri and Alexa are just the primitive starting points of that.
Mm-hmm.
But we all know the limitations of using those voice-based apps right now. But sooner or later, they're going to improve on it. And imagine it can replace Google because all you have to do is say, hey Alexa, I want to order pizza. And unlike Google, it's not going to give you a list of choices. It's just going to give you one solution. The solution it thinks it's best suited to your question.
Mm-hmm.
So your whole Google search results is going to be replaced by a single selection, right?
Well, I don't know about that, man. There'll at least be the illusion of choice at the very minimum, but I think also the market will balance that out to an extent.
Well, I mean, like, you type in a Google search now, you got pages and pages and pages of search results. Of course, realistically, you focus on the first page, right? But I can see that when it becomes voice based, the search result will be even more narrowed down than a page on Google. It won't list out all the choices on one page, which could be up to 15 different line items, right? It's not going to list out every single one for you on voice. So it will narrow that down even further. So the trick is, how do you make that even shorter list? Make it on that shorter list. Like it's already tough enough now to get on the first page of Google.
Hmm.
But if you and assuming that the first page is about 15 search results, Say now you're down to 5 search results based on voice, based on the practicality of of the voice delivery. It will ramble off the top 5 choices for you. That means it's even more difficult for you to land on the first on that first page, so to speak, to be selected as one of those top 5. So that's where the competition is going to be. How can you find yourself, if you're going to be a marketer, to be chosen to be on that short list? That's going to be tough.
Will it though? Because I mean, the tools are enabling. This practically rounds back to where we started about Clubhouse and connecting as photographers, and you were talking about like the business end of things with consulting and balancing your time. This is where I think that final 5 out of the 15 pages, the 5 results out of 15 pages, much less, on the voice will be integrating your social score, what kind of work you're doing, how all the aspects that basically we're giving up towards the big database that's coming up to help out on this next. It, for example, would say, well, if I just searched for Michael Lee Hong Kong, I'm guessing because of your first name, there's certainly not that many matches, but there's going to be at least a few.
Well, I would say, oh, first of all, to answer your question, yeah, there'll be a few. Okay. Because Michael Lee is a very common name, okay?
It is.
Uh,
Okay. I didn't want to make any assumptions one way or another.
no.
But my point, mate, is that if you typed in Michael Lee and I was looking for you, I'd already be adding photographer just out of common sense. But then if there's like 5 Michael Lee photographers and I'm not even saying Hong Kong, the chance of you popping up more is going to be you being active on social media with Instagram, photo posts, maybe Twitter also, but related directly to photography. Because we're not just going by how active you are, we're actually dissecting your data. And then probably popping over to Clubhouse to round out that social score. If you're on there, active, a moderator of a few rooms, or put in so many hours on the clock, wouldn't you be part of that top 5 voice result?
Um,
Which is good also because then now we're relating it back to photography, not just conceptual futurism.
sure, sure. I like the segue, and that was smart. But
Thank you.
uh okay, the I think that they definitely will need to use some sort of AI to for it to infiltrate someone's social media score, to figure out if, to prioritize them to see if they make the cut,
Let's
right?
say
That's number.
consolidate as a more user friendly word.
Yeah. I don't know if I don't know if that even exists yet, right? Are we somehow being scored in the background somewhere, based on our social media presence and activity? Who knows? Maybe we are, but I can't see how. But anyway, I mean, in order to do so, whoever is doing these rankings of each individual person out there has to somehow know that my Clubhouse account is the same person as my Facebook account, is the same person as my Instagram account.
AI in your profile picture. That's pretty straightforward, even if you change it up on each account. As long as you're using something relatively consistent, especially your face.
Maybe,
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
right? Okay. And if they somehow can link all those accounts together and conclude that it's the same person,
Yeah.
then they can probably find a way to start ranking them based on the number of hours that they spend on each app, and how much engagement they do. Right? Sure, I can see that. Um, what was the other point? Something to do with, what were you saying earlier about? You prompted me to say this, so it was. Do you remember what you said last?
Oh, this is the danger of being a loose show. We were talking about social media and consolidating all this for photographers, especially trying to get to that top
Oh,
5 result. Yep.
yes. So thank you. Yes, that reminded. So the thing is, if you search for me right now, Michael Lee photography, Hong Kong, that is not a common search phrase. You would only search for me that way using those words if you already knew me,
Right.
right? But if you were just looking for a photographer in Hong Kong, you would just search using Hong Kong photographer.
Yeah.
right? And I probably won't show up in the first page because of my SEO and because of the niche market that I work in. I'm not going to serve the common uh, photography customer, and that's why my SEO needs are very low. I don't need to rank high on SEO because my client base is so small. It's actually more effective for me to reach out one to one with each of those customers to figure out their needs and to see if I can help them, right? I can't. I'm not marketing in the way kind of a normal um, business to consumer type of photographer would. I think a B2C photographer would definitely benefit more from ranking high on Google.
Oh, absolutely. That's basically what my photo tour is. It's business to customer, and I'm working
For
Google
sure.
and everything around it for that. Yeah,
For
but
sure.
I'm not.
Yeah.
If I was doing niche work like yourself with the car work in particular, it's done more to marketing to the client, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very targeted down to the like when I market to my clients, I figure out the exact people and uh, I target those exact people um, directly. So I would send them stuff via snail mail with their names on the envelope already. Like that's how I do it.
Really?
Yeah, yeah,
Huh. I guess that is the most effective real physical product.
yeah. It's worked for me since day one. I remember the first person I marketed to was a art director at an advertising agency in Toronto, who, um, and I sent him a postcard. Like not, it's similar to a postcard you would buy in a tourist shop. Was basically there's an image on one side and a blank space on the other side for you to write something. Like that's the same idea. I made a card with an image of mine in one side, and the other side I wrote a handwritten note. You know, dear, what's his name, Rob, right? I'd like to introduce you myself as a photographer. Hope you would love to see my portfolio sometime. Signed it, and I made it so customized, so such a special delivery that I didn't even put a stamp on it to mail it. I hand delivered it to the agency, so that
Nice.
when he received the envelope, he would know that it was hand delivered because there was no stamp on it.
Yeah, yeah, very
So
smooth.
he knew that I made the extra effort to go down there to drop it off with the receptionist, right? And then when he opened it, again, he saw a handwritten note, right? It wasn't a printout. Because if it's a printout, he could probably assume that I printed 1,000 of these and just kind of sprayed and prayed it to a whole bunch of people. But he knows that because it's handwritten, there's only so many I could handwrite. So again, he felt an extra special, level of attention, right? So is this type of customer that I'm targeting towards? It's like you really make them feel special, right? And when you kind of get that, then they respond. It's not the mass market way of marketing
Hmm.
where you kind of just um, share all your stuff with to a whole bunch of people, and the people that reply to it, you have no idea who they are. They could be anybody,
Yeah.
right? And that's probably what some of your customers are like. You probably never heard of them the first time they came to you.
To a fair degree. Now I'm at the point of referrals and definite networking or agency booking, especially on the tour side. But yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. 9 times out of 10, I don't know them beforehand.
For me is that I always know when the phone rings or I get the email, I know exactly who they are already
Hmm.
because I reached out to them first.
Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
This is basically how you do this. You've always had this set up towards getting photography work. How did you get into at least commercial photography?
I just always thought of it as the highest uh, form of photography. I think that's what attracted me to it.
Uh-huh.
In the beginning, at least. Now, probably not so much, but in the beginning, um, I've always kind of seen it as the holy grail of photography, and that is the absolute highest level in all respects in terms of creative. And no, we're not talking about just general commercial photography, because I think commercial photography could be defined as B2B. Anything B2B is commercial photography. But I want to specifically say that it's more about advertising photography. So in one respect, I would say that it's got the highest levels of production, meaning that they go all out and spend whatever needs to be spent to get the image done right, which I totally respect, right? So they don't really cut corners too much. Um, they have like the clients usually are very sophisticated, uh, well educated in terms of art, uh, know what they want, which
Hmm.
I respect a lot as well. Very creative people. So it's a pleasure to work with these people most of the time, and the work speaks for itself. It's very high uh, quality levels, creative levels. So it's the bar is set very high in every respect, and I've always thought that hey, this is the goal. To be able to work with these people in this industry is the ultimate dream job, right? So that's how I got into shooting for advertising. It's because I just saw it as the pinnacle. But that was the way I thought about it in the beginning. Now I've opened up a lot more to all different types of photography, and I've gotten to respect uh, lots of different types of photography because I start to understand the unique challenges that each type of photography has. And the more challenging it is that I understand, the more respect I give it. Right. So it's kind of like I said in the room earlier today. I don't know if you were there, but if you're a foodie influencer on social media, but you don't know how to cook, you can only appreciate food to a certain level. But if you know how to cook, you appreciate food a lot more because you know how challenging it could be, right?
I remember you saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a lot of foodie influencers out there who basically are so-called food critics. But if they don't know how to cook themselves, they don't know how challenging some of these dishes are to make and create,
Yeah.
and how much can you really appreciate. It's the same with a certain type of sport. If you don't play the sport, but how much can you really appreciate it, right? Because like for example, I think that I used to ride a motorcycle, a sport bike, and um, because of that, started watching motorcycle racing, and I really got to appreciate the sport of motorcycle racing because I know how hard it is to ride a motorcycle, or at those speeds,
Of course. Yeah.
right? But if I didn't ride a motorcycle or that type of motorcycle, I could really never appreciate motorsports, like motorcycle racing, the way that someone who actually rides can, right? So it's the same thing with photography as well, right? So yeah. Anyway, sorry, I digress, but
Not at all, mate. It's a very valid point because fundamentally, I had the same thing. By the way, I came to appreciate music when I took up DJing for 7 years. Just even the simple thing of getting two beats on top of each other isn't as simple as it looks like or sounds like in this case. But what you're describing and what I was feeling with music is just simply, and I think cinema, especially a high production value film, shows this off most. If you do it really right, it'll look natural and effortless. It's that elegance that says, well, of course it looks like this. So it feels
Mm-hmm.
so natural. People don't realize that there were tons of blood, sweat, tears, lost takes, sound problems, people flubbing their lines and whatever just to get to that like 2 seconds that ties the whole movie together. So with
Yeah.
photography, it's the same, and that's probably what drew you to it is that elegance that advertising can really take in. And I'm glad you honed in on it that it's advertising specifically. Commercial is a little bit too broad on that for sure.
Yeah, totally. I think there's a very specific workflow in shooting for advertising agencies and whatnot. I mean, there's a process,
Hmm.
right? And I enjoy that process very much. I totally respect that process. But that is very different from shooting a plate of food for a restaurant, which is also a commercial, technically a commercial client, you know. But it's, you know, that's a very different um, approach. It's still photography, I guess. That's the only common link
Yeah.
I can say. But um, that's why it's difficult when someone asks a question, how do you get into shooting for clients, big clients, and through an agency? How do you work with agencies? You know, it never really dawned on me that the only reason I know how to do it is because I was in it for so long, and it's become kind of second nature to me. But to explain it to someone who's never done it before, it's suddenly you realize it's a lot of stuff to know, right?
Yeah.
So I think like photographers, agents can tell you that it's a very nuanced, sensitive, and yet sophisticated industry to be in. There's just certain ways to talk to people. Um, there's certain protocols that just unspoken rules that just need to be. It's just the way people do things, you
It's
know.
part of the efficiency of it, I presume, and the elegance also.
It's not. It's neat. I don't think it's either of those things, Andy.
Really?
It's just a weird. It's just a weird tick,
Huh.
or sorry, a weird twitch that some people have. That it's just the way it works. Like I can give you an example. Okay, if you're on a shoot, you're on set, and you're shooting a campaign for somebody, and the art director is there, and the end client, which is the brand, someone from the brand is there. So maybe the art director and the end client representative is having a conversation, and they decide that, oh yeah, we should add a couple of shots to this shoot today, right? Um, and they will uh, probably ask the photographer if that's okay, or they'll if my agent is there, they'll ask my agent if that's okay. You know, can we just add a couple of shots? Um, either me or my agent cannot say yes or no right away. This is one of the weird nuances to this industry.
Okay.
Uh, we have to talk to the person in charge of the money. So on the agency side, there is another person that we have to clear with the budget first, and that person is usually the producer on the agency side. So the art director, who's on the creative side, has no idea usually about money. He's just worried about the creative, and he's obviously successfully convinced the end client that it was a good idea to add two shots. So obviously the both of them want to add two shots, but as a photographer or my photographer's agent, we'll have to say sure, but it's going to cost you, right? And we cannot go to the art director or the end client and say yes, but it's going to cost as much. It just it seems very natural, but we can't do it. So the proper way is to go to the producer and talk to him or her and say, can do we have do you guys have budget to add two shots?
Mm-hmm.
And then if they say yes, we do have budget, then the producer will end up telling the art director and the end client said, yeah, it's okay, let's do it, you know. But it has to go around this weird circle.
Huh.
Yeah.
Is that specific to Hong Kong or maybe Asian culture? Is that just in general industry standard international?
It's an industry standard. And
Huh.
this is something that has become second nature to me.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't even question it, even though now that I talk about it, it sounds really fucked up, right? But
Kind of fucked up. It's not too
yeah,
bad, but yeah, it's
it's
definitely
kind of fucked up. But yeah, it's not logical.
yeah.
It's not logical at all. It's a whole kind of detour kind of way of doing things. It's not very direct, but that's kind of the way it's working over there.
Huh.
So um, so these nuances you only learn as you go along. People make mistakes and they say the wrong things at the wrong times. It happens all the time. Like basically another example is if you're on set and I'm shooting something and I'm usually shooting tethered, so the images come up on the computer, and because it comes up on a screen, everyone has access to see it, right? And that means everyone has an opinion about it.
Mm-hmm.
There's only a certain number of people who can express those opinions on set, right? So I can express that my opinion because it's my shoot, but client can express their opinions because they're paying for it, but no one else really has any say, right? So even if they have an opinion, they really cannot say anything. Even if it's a good opinion, and even if the client and I agree that it's a good opinion, they still cannot interject with their opinion because it's just not their place. They have no right.
But do they
So
have any reason? Could you see anyone in that room other than the client who has a valid say? I mean, even the producer who's in charge of the money, as long as you're within budget when that shot pops up on screen, what do they really have to say at the end of the day?
I mean, like, say for example, you're shooting some talent, and you have your whole crew there, you have your stylist there, you have your makeup artist there, you have a whole bunch of people in front of that computer,
Yeah.
and that image pops up. Usually, I can say something, the client can say something, the art director can say something, obviously,
Yeah.
but everyone else is basically waiting for whatever reaction that we give. And even if, you know, they say, we love it, you know, you might say, okay, maybe now it's safe to agree and say, oh, I love it too,
The
right?
yes men
But
situation, sure.
it's best if you don't. It's best if you say, I'm glad you like it.
Okay.
Instead of saying, oh, I loved it too, like, yeah, we agree, high five. Yeah. Mm. Because what if they suddenly change their mind and say, well, you know what, actually, on second thought, I don't know. Then you already told them that you like it. Then there's a conflict of interest. So
Hmm.
just avoid all of that. It could add to a lot of complications down the road. So it's tricky. It's really tricky. And these are very small nuances that you don't really realize until you've been in the field for a long time. And there's probably a whole bunch more that I don't even know about, because maybe there's certain clients that I've worked with that are used to doing things a certain way in a certain part of the world. Who knows?
Of course. And
But
that's also part of where people like to work with the same people over again because they understand their processes, ticks, nuances, all that.
yeah, I think that's why assisting is such a big thing because you can get exposed directly to this world
Uh,
um, um, before you enter it as the photographer, or as someone people look to on set for answers. You're there for a reason because you're an assistant. You get to be there. You have a right and you have a purpose, but you don't have the responsibilities.
you're not on the firing line, sure.
Yeah, so is the best place to learn, and you soak up all these little nuances here and there, and then you're like, and if you have questions, you can ask the right people later. But that's how you learn, man. And I think assisting is one of these things that are completely overlooked these days because um, I think the people don't really have the patience anymore. They expect things faster, results faster, fame faster, because of the immediacy of the social media, instant gratification. They're used to that. Or what's that Tinder app? Swipe left, swipe right. These things are, how do you like you basically make passing judgment on a potential boyfriend or girlfriend in an instant, you
Yeah.
know, or whereas, you don't even get it to give them a chance to know them, at least a little bit about them. You can pass judgment so quickly. So I think people are used to um, faster reactions, faster decision making.
And faster expectation. Yeah. And even before social media, the world's been accelerating quite a bit over the last 50 years.
But unfortunately, I think that there are still certain things that you have to just pay your dues, and that takes time, right? And I think fewer and fewer people realize that nowadays, especially the younger generations who are trying to come up to um, make it, quote unquote, as a photographer. They see a lot of people suddenly become famous, but what they don't see is the years of being a nobody and working hard before they got to that stage. So assisting is part of that ordeal, is to uh, pay your dues. And I paid my dues for 6 years as an assistant, sweeping floors, cleaning toilets, um, and not even before I got to touch a camera or be on set, I was like doing all this like um, janitorial work even before I qualified to touch a piece of equipment. You know, I you know I remembered even when I was starting to shoot as a professional and hiring assistants for the first time, I thought it was already natural to ask them to, hey, can you give the toilet a clean? And I just assumed that they would do it because, hey, I did it during my days as an assistant. I just thought, and I didn't realize by then the generation gap had already changed. It already shifted to the next generation. And I got pushback from my assistants because they were telling me that, hey, I wasn't hired to clean toilets. I was hired to be on set. And I'm like, oh, you know, I guess expectations have changed a little bit since I was assisting, right? Because when I was assisting, you were told to clean the toilet, you just clean the toilet. It was no questions asked. You just did it, right?
Yeah.
But nowadays, assistants only work for you if they are working on set. You want someone to clean the toilet, hire a janitor.
Yeah. They don't have time for that. They're accelerating towards getting on set and getting on with it.
And nowadays, they're even skipping the entire assisting stage altogether. They just want to, pick up a camera and shoot and become a professional photographer, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, you're skipping quite a few steps here, in my book anyway. But the thing is, there are unicorns out there that are doing it. And I think the danger is that everyone expects to be that unicorn. You're
Well,
not a unicorn.
it's the unicorns that shine brightest and hardest, so you don't see the thousand normal horses behind them who aren't keeping up.
Yeah, yeah. So I hope that, like, when I have students and they're all they just seemed very impatient. They
Mm.
always seem like they're in a rush, and they're usually they're young, they're enthusiastic. I respect that, but what they don't expect is that they think that they can just do something that I teach them, uh, that makes them famous overnight or makes them successful overnight. It's like, what's that thing that I'm missing that can, solve all my problems? Well, there isn't, like at least not in my book. I just don't see any anyone becoming successful overnight. So even those people who so-called seem successful overnight were not done overnight, right? It just appears that way, right? So they have this kind of they're a little bit delusioned. Maybe that's too strong a word, but some of them just, and I don't see what the rush is. It just seems like they're always in such a rush, and they're so young. It's not that they're old and they have not many years left.
Hmm.
You know, they're so young. They have their entire future ahead of them, but they seem so rushed to get so much done in as little time as possible. And I'm like, maybe you should just stop and smell the roses and enjoy the journey a little bit more, because it's gonna be a journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it is a rising factor. But I mean, to an extent, to be totally fair, I felt that in my youth. Like I got the power, the energy. I didn't think I was right about anything in that kind of like ego push to the top drive. But I think with the energy of youth, it's sometimes hard to hold back to give them fair credit because we've been there too.
Yeah, I mean, I assisted for 6 years, and this was after I graduated from um, university at Ryerson studying photography. So I already had a bachelor's degree in photography. Um, I knew that that degree in no way would help me get a job as a photographer. It was good education, looking back,
Hmm.
but it wasn't uh, didn't help in any way in preparing myself to be a professional photographer. There was a gap in between, and that was assisting. And I assisted uh, both as a freelancer, which meant I worked for a whole bunch of different photographers, uh, usually only on the day of the shoots, which is where most of the action happened anyway. But I also worked as a full-time assistant for one photographer for 2 years, and that allowed you to see a whole bunch of the business that you don't see as a freelancer. So I found it important to do both because freelancers get the exposure to many different types of photographers because you're only hired on the day of the shoots, and you get hired by a whole bunch of different types of people for a whole variety of different types of shoots. One day I could be shooting on an architecture shoot. One day I could be helping someone for an editorial shoot. One day I'll be helping someone for a fashion shoot. So I got to experience and be on set for all these different types of shoots, which is great.
I was gonna
But
say
then
that's fantastic. Yeah, the
that's
variety.
great, yeah. So
Yeah.
I mean, you get to see all these different types of photographers working. I mean, I met Ben Affleck, I met Matt Damon when they were shooting for the Roots campaign. And like I was working for full time for a studio at that one point, and they hired Andrew Eccles, who's a big time portrait shooter, fashion shooter from New York City. He flew up to Toronto, and they rented the studio that I was working in for this shoot. So they just rented the space, but I was required to be there just to help facilitate people because I knew the studio, and got to meet all the A-listers that day, which was amazing. Um, but got to see how these guys worked, which is the top echelon of like New York photographers. So from that to working full time, when you're working full time as a photographer assistant, you get to see all the behind the scenes of the business as well, right? It's not just how to set up a light on set; it's how to handle the books, it's how to keep the studio in working order, it's how to um, basically run a business.
Hmm.
And as a freelancer, you never get to see how to run a business. You only get to learn how to do a photo shoot. So I think you need both. I think you definitely need to full time for someone to really to get in depth. So what are you doing on days when you're not shooting? Like how do you run the business? What kind of back end stuff do you need to do? You only see that as a full time assistant because you are doing those things for your photographer, right? But as a freelancer, you're only hired on the days of the shoots. So what happens in the days in between shoots? there's something going on that no freelancer will ever get hired to help with.
Yeah.
So
The
yeah,
magic sauce backstage, absolutely. It
sure,
binds it all
yeah.
together. Yeah.
And the thing is that you learn so much. You just like there's still so many things that I've learned back then that I still apply today that no one knows about. Like
Hmm.
no one I see in the world right now is doing is stuff that I learned that I'm still applying to my work, right? And my assistants see that, and they're like, "Where the hell did you come up with these ideas?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, 15 years ago." You know? um, but the thing is, I was going to a point that you would learn so much, and you will assume that you would wake up one day and think that I've learned enough and I'm ready to transition from assistant to professional. Um, and that day never came, and that's why I ended up assisting for so long because I thought it will just that day will come and
Hmm.
it'll just be natural transition for me. I would just know somehow. But honestly, that day never came. So, somewhere during my 6th year as an assistant, I realized that I had to forcefully quit. And, when you're doing it for
Walk away,
six
quit.
years,
Is that what you mean?
yeah,
Like totally
walk
cut it
away
off?
as, yeah, walk away as an assistant and
Hmm.
never look back and just do it cold turkey and become a professional photographer. And mind you, that day was difficult because the phone is ringing all the time by people because you become a well-known assistant in your city, which is Toronto, right? So people start calling you, or you get referrals. It's just like as a photographer, you build yourself up as someone that's
A go-to,
trustworthy,
trustworthy. Yeah.
good person, a good assistant, right? So you get the phone calls, and then you have to start turning away all those calls because you suddenly have to tell people that I'm not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And it's difficult because that's income, not a lot, but that's income. And that's your only source of income, really, at that time, even though it doesn't pay well.
And I'm imagining also you're still going, there's still a part of you that's going, but if I just take that job, this could be the one that leads to the client turning to me and going, actually, you're my guy.
No, I mean, the thing is that you're not assisting to get clients
No, I know that was a
right?
horrible way. You don't pinch clients off of your off the people trading you, that you're assisting. But do you know what I mean? Like, did you have that sort of worry that like, if I turn away from this, maybe I'm ending up completely away from photography in one way or another?
Oh no, I mean, I knew that the only choice I had was the only reason to quit assisting was to turn pro.
Okay, so it was time. It was just that sure.
Because the thing is that assisting is hard work. It's
Mm,
low pay.
mm,
You have no life basically
mm.
because you're working so hard, and the spare time that you have, you sleep. Right?
Yeah.
It's that kind of life. So you put yourself through quite a bit of struggle as an assistant, okay? And you need to get some return on that investment. So if you did it for so long, only to quit photography at the end, God, it's a waste of time. Like I want to say, I paid my dues as an assistant, so I can turn pro, so I can put all that experience to good use as a professional photographer. It'll be a real waste to suffer through all those times and then throw it all away.
Yeah. Like doing a medical degree and going off and opening a dog food store.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I liken the similarities I hear from med students, because they basically, I feel like they have the same lifestyle as I did, where they sleep whenever they can, and um, because they're just so overworked.
Mm-hmm.
Like back then, I was pulling over 100 hours a week as a
Jesus.
full timer. Yeah, and that was normal. So when people are saying, "Oh, I pulled an 80-hour week," I'm like, "Is that just for 1 week?" You know, like I was regularly pulling over 100-hour weeks easily,
That's serious business.
which basically means that you spend every waking moment at the studio,
Yeah. Were you
basically.
were you at least saving? I mean, next to the knowledge that you were saving, were you making some cash?
Well, I mean, you have no time to spend any money,
Okay.
right? So yeah, I guess you are saving, but that's not because you want to save. It's only because you don't have time to spend, right? So like I remembered I was trying to build up my kit, my first camera kit
Mm-hmm.
at the time. And so the money I was making was basically going towards like bit by bit towards buying the system. And I would buy a body from like some shop like KEH in the New York City, or one of these shops that were online, like barely internet back then.
Sure. Reliable, but yeah, yeah.
A few months later, I would save enough to buy a lens for it and slowly build my system. It took me years to build my Hasselblad system,
Mm.
and it was only just like two bodies and like three lenses, and maybe like three film backs, a Polaroid back, and that was a system. But the good thing about you know saving so long for a system back then is that system can last you for 10 years.
It's a
Right.
good investment with Hasselblad on that end, definitely.
Like you didn't have to buy new gear every couple of years just to keep updated back then. It was just like you bought this set and hey, especially Hasselblads back then, they didn't change at all, right? Like like they didn't come out with new cameras uh at all, really. They had a motorized version, they had a basic version. The
Yeah.
lenses didn't change for years.
Well, that's
Um,
why it's an investment. The stuff, it ain't broke, so don't fix it.
yeah, it just wasn't the style too. Like they didn't need to make that many improvements back then to improve on the system. I mean, I think the way the 500 what's called the V series now was designed was that any current component can still work with the very first um, part of the system that was designed back in the 40s, 1940s, that is, right? So it was just made to work together. So you can get the oldest camera body ever made and the latest lens and still put them together and work. Nothing changed, right? So so it took me a long time to build that system, and I used it for 10 years, and I loved it. But yeah, that's why it's so hard for me to own a camera nowadays, because I usually buy things to keep for a long time, and it's just difficult to keep anything longer than a couple of years nowadays, it seems.
On digital, it's a strange exercise. And I'm glad you brought that up because this is something you've mentioned more than a few times on Clubhouse. You don't really own a camera, do you? Even though you're a
Nope.
professional working pro.
Well, I mean, like this is the now that we're on video, this is the only camera I own, which is Canon M5,
Right on.
right?
Okay.
Yeah. But I have an adapter for it that converts the M mount to the EF mount,
Good.
right? So this is an EF lens,
Yeah.
and that's basically it. And that's just for my. It's just to say I have a camera because I just don't feel like I'm a photographer if I don't have any camera. So yeah, it's for happy snaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, and this I've kept for over 2 years now. So it's even after 2 years, it's starting to break down.
Well, it's not a
It's just,
Hasselblad. Yeah. That's a consumer
but
level
it's also
camera.
I don't even think they're designed to last more than 2 years now. Like, it's just they're not made as well.
On the consumer end, also, you're still probably using it more than the typical happy snapper. So I think after a couple of years of rough and tumble on a photographer's level, it can start wearing out. even if it's
Yeah,
not for commercial jobs. I understand.
yeah. And I have shot commercial jobs for it though. Um, it's totally fine for that, but for some of them, especially like social media stuff, is totally fine. But I just like on one hand, I like the flexibility of renting right now because I can pick exactly which camera I think works best for a specific type of job. And
Mm.
because all jobs are different, um, there's always the best camera for each job, and that could be a very different camera from job to job, right? But what I don't like is having to pick up and return the gear because that's like a trek out there and then a trek back and then another trek out there to return it and then a trek back.
Mm.
So, there's pluses and minuses, but I figured out ways of kind of working around that. So the rental houses also have assistance for hire.
Oh, really? They've plugged that in too. Smart.
Yeah, so some of the staff that work at these rental houses, they're also photo assistants. So what I'll do is when I rent gear from them, I'll also hire one of the staff as an assistant. So on the shooting day, they bring all the gear to the shoot. I don't have to pick it up. And then when the shoot's done, they return the gear because they're going back to work anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't have to return the gear, right? So so that kind of works out well in the end. Um, but yeah, so far so good. I mean, I think there comes a point where the at least for me in my career, I did start off photography as a gearhead, as because I got into it really young,
Mm.
and when you're a kid, a camera is a toy. It's not You're not really an artist,
Mm.
right? So I loved tinkering with a toy, which was a camera. And so I naturally got associated with photography as this mechanical device that you play with. And that led to being kind of gear centric way of thinking. And as I got into more serious about it and got into school about it, I still had this kind of thing in the back of my mind that the camera was important, to very important. But it took me a while to switch over that way of thinking to a point where now I don't give a damn what kind of camera is used. Because I care so much more about the image,
Hmm.
the final image, that I don't really care how it was achieved. What kind of camera was used to create it. It doesn't matter at all anymore. So it's a big 180 switch in terms of thinking because back then it was like, oh, the the the, the lenses and all that nerdy stuff was really important to me. But because I focused so much on that, the image side was kind of neglected because you can only focus so much attention to something, right? So once I switched over to just think, the image is the most important, then I don't care much about the equipment because you can't put 100% on both, right? So when I switched over like that and that way of thinking, the of course the image quality, the technical quality of an image is still directly related to equipment, like for example sharpness, okay, um, or resolution. Those are directly related to what kind of cameras you use and what kind of lenses you use. But they're all getting so good nowadays that they're becoming less and less important is in terms of selection
Very
and what
much.
you choose, right? There's very few cameras now that are where their quality is noticeably bad.
Yeah,
When
even the
you're,
uniqueness is fairly standardized. There's only so
yeah,
many unique points to each system nowadays.
so because of that, they're all good cameras now. You know, I just think that it's so much more. important to focus your priorities on the actual images. And as a photographer, I think it's the images that's the most important, not the tools you use to get there, right? We've had these conversations on Clubhouse over and over again about how important is the camera. And I would say that sure, there's certain instances and certain types of photography where the camera is more important. One example could be sports photography, where speed is important or focus accuracy is important. Um, all right, but those are rare cases. I think the the more the less technical your work requires, the less important the camera needs to be.
Yeah. Unless it's getting specifically as far away as you can specifically from a high quality detailed camera, like doing instant film work, for example.
Sure.
Then the camera's critical, but in a different way. Yeah, I see your
Yeah.
point absolutely.
But I think for most people, and we're speaking very generally,
Mm,
most people and most types of photography out there, the camera does not matter,
no, not
right?
fundamentally.
If you're shooting street stuff, portraiture, weddings, or whatever, most people shoot. And I'm only basing this on what I hear out there. Hello, my name is so and so, and I'm a blank photographer.
Mm,
Most of the people filling in those blanks are either portrait, fashion, wedding, headshot, a lot of B to C mostly, I would say. Uh, but anyway, that type of photography, camera doesn't matter.
not that
But if you
much.
say I'm a high speed, sports photographer, okay, yeah, maybe then your camera isn't more important. Or I'm a documentary, or I'm a war photographer, okay? Then your camera probably needs to take a beating, right? So you have specific technical needs, all right? Or
An
I don't know.
archivist at a museum, that's where the 400 megapixel option on the Fuji comes in.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or I'm an underwater photographer, something like that, something very specialized, right? Then maybe you have specific needs. But generally, I think for 90% of the shooters out there, every camera is fine. You know, don't focus too much on it.
Or even
Yeah,
at that, just look at like the basic class, money class, if you will. You know, consumer, prosumer, and pro. If you're doing Formula Ones or underwater shoots, you go pro. If you're doing a well lit studio, you can probably get away with casual to prosumer. Certainly, I think that's a
sure.
basic a fair baseline. Eh?
I mean, it's no surprise to me that the Canon and Nikon professional top end cameras like
Hmm.
the 1DX series and the Nikon D whatever 6, 7, whatever they are at, you know,
D6 right now. Yeah, yeah. They're sports high end six screen camera.
that level of camera they do not have the highest specs,
They have different specs in a lot of
right?
cases.
Like they have specs that a lot of pros who buy those cameras need,
Yeah,
like speed,
yeah,
like durability,
yeah,
those specs,
yeah.
but they don't have the image quality specs like megapixels.
Hmm.
That's actually on a lower end camera, kind of
Yeah,
like right now the Canon R5 is not a high end spec camera, but it's got the highest megapixels. Or the 5DSR is a 50 megapixel camera, but that's not a 1DX series camera.
no,
You
because
know,
it doesn't have the autofocus to match. It has the megapixels, but not the focus, which is usually
right?
the trade off in these cases,
Yeah.
isn't it?
But it's weird to me that every camera brand out there who has, you know, uh, their flagship cameras is not the highest megapixel camera. Sony A series wasn't the high is A1 is not the highest megapixel.
Absolutely.
It's got the highest speed, right? 1DX is also the highest speed. D6 is also the highest speed, but that's considered flagship, and it's not the megapixels. They're all the high megapixel cameras are a tier lower.
Of course, they're the next to flagship or co-flagships, but under the Speed machine, of course.
Yeah. So somehow speed is regarded as a higher pro value than megapixels.
See, that makes total sense to me. Maybe to me, all the megapixels in the world aren't going to save an out of focus shot. So maybe it's just that natural instinct towards clarity over detail.
It's weird though, because I think for certain photographers, autofocus is really probably the most important thing, and they
Yeah.
they require the highest accuracy and speed, which the flagship camera will deliver. For me, I have all the time in the world to make sure I get focus right. I can do it manually if I need to, right? I don't need autofocus at all, to be honest with you, right? But what I do need is higher megapixels, high dynamic range,
Mm.
um, higher bit depth. That's what's important for me. And I can find all of that in one tier less, right? If I were to buy Canon, Nikon, or Sony, I can find that for A7R4, R5 Canon, or a D850, I think, I
Yeah,
guess,
on that range
right?
for the megapixels and
Yeah,
range. Yeah.
which which suits me just fine because not they're all reasonably priced,
Yes, very
right?
much so, because they're not the flagships, as you say. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. Uh, so it's really weird that it's interesting that every photographer. I mean, it's well expected that every type of photographer out there has different sets of priorities. I
Mm.
totally respect that a sports photographer or action photographer would value speed higher than anything else, whether it's frames per second or focus speed, none of which I care about, right? But so it's different, and I totally respect those needs. It's just weird for me that a camera manufacturer would decide to put certain criteria valued as a higher spec than other criteria. And I don't know why they have all chosen to value focus accuracy and speed over megapixels, bit depth. Well, maybe bit depth, they're probably higher too on the flagships, but definitely not megapixels.
No, absolutely not. That's part of the physics of autofocus versus megapixels. One has to give to the other to a certain extent.
I suppose the technology isn't there yet to combine high megapixel and high autofocus, or would it just be too expensive?
It is and it isn't. The D850 is particularly known as having the autofocus system of, I think, the D5. This is the Nikon, of course, and it's a megapixel camera, but it doesn't have the autofocus capability of the D6, and I'm not sure it can. And when you look at even on the Sony level, where they tend to put out two types of models, one is better at autofocus, but you trade off megapixels. The other one, you get more pixels, but the autofocus always goes down. So I'm
Mm,
presuming they're either purposely across the industry segmenting those two ends of the market and then just picking one as flagship, probably on costs of development or the mechanics. But at the end of the day, I think it's down to the physics of the sensor because without being an expert, this is where we need Stefan to pop up. This is where we need to be able to ping him in a room. But I think because of the pixel density, that you start compromising your autofocus speeds a little bit.
okay, so I think the closest compromise is the Fuji GFX 100S right now, where
Yeah,
they've somehow found a sweet spot between full frame convenience and speed with the high megapixels of medium format.
precisely. And and because that sensor is bigger, it has less pixel density spread through it. So they can get away with 100 megapixels as well as some more autofocus magic. But we're getting very nerdy here, but that's totally fine. That's part of a photography show. Uh, but the without getting too nerdy on it, I believe the GFX 100 uses another autofocus on top of that, which might be a little bit algorithmic supercomputer stuff, which is part of where big cameras pay off for big microchips.
Well, I I've used the GFX 100. It's a pretty decent camera. I do like it. If
It's
it
effective.
it, it's effective. Yes,
Hmm.
it's but it's if you're the type of photographer that um, gets inspired by the touchy feelies of holding a camera, um, if you're the type that gets inspired by a certain type of feel
The
of a
aesthetic.
camera,
Hmm.
yeah, and get it. This camera won't give you that. Yeah, because you can pick up a Leica or you can pick up a Hasselblad and you can feel something sometimes, right? Like
Yeah.
I know it sounds tacky and all, but there is a certain sense of emotion and inspiration sometimes by picking up a piece of gear that just is so well made, and it's some of that just kind of transfers to you and almost inspires you to shoot better. Like it's a weird feeling sometimes. I get that from my old Hasselblad, for example. It's that whole you know how well this thing's built, and you that part of that quality somehow transfers and inspires you to create better photos. You know, um, the new Hasselblad X series, the X1 series
Mm.
is feels like that too. The H series does not feel like that at all. Feels like a plastic toy. So the Fuji doesn't really inspire anything. The Leicas do. The Leicas feel amazing, right? But I don't know. It obviously it doesn't really help in any way of me producing better images because, as you know, I've used a whole bunch of different cameras. I think the one thing that helps influence me in in my preferences towards cameras is what kind of images I've shot with them. So if I've rented a Hasselblad, for example, uh, digital one or phase one, and I just so happened to have shot a good set of images that I liked,
Hmm.
then just naturally I would like that system more,
That's fair.
right?
Well, to me, mate, if I may jump in on that, that's also where I think the aesthetics and the feel of the camera can make a difference. I felt it when I picked up Fuji the first time, and I don't know if you're talking about the first GFX 100 or the more compact one that they put out after that, which they did with the 50s also, where it's more rangefinder design, and they shrink it right down to a little bit more of a pleasant feel. But regardless of that model or otherwise, when you pick up a Leica, for example, like you say, I think if you get that comfort, that little bit of extra finesse that works itself into your hand, that's where you get to the part of photography where the camera's supposed to be an extension of your hand. It just makes it feel all a little bit more natural and integrated, and you can just cut loose or feel a little more comfortable with it. Kind of like if you're driving a really nice car and it just all the aesthetics and the feel of it fit. Not even not even like yeah, like not necessarily being in a Lamborghini, but being in a vintage old Mustang power car, and that's totally your trip, and it makes you drive 10% better just because you're in the zone.
Andy, I think the difference is that I can understand and relate to driving the car,
Mm.
like you just mentioned, because you are engaged with that machine. You are physically interacting with it, and same with the camera.
Yeah.
So you may think that the thing is that when a lot of times when I'm shooting, I I don't it the camera's not an extension of my hand. It's not even on my hand. It's on a tripod. I
Sure.
rarely touch the camera. So that interaction is not part of my game at all. I don't need that camera to feel a certain way. It just needs to produce images that I liked. And if for some way I made a good set of imagery using a particular piece of camera, which was on a tripod all the time, that I rarely touched the camera, and I was controlling everything tethered through the computer, that feeling is that connection to the camera is not important because I'm not even touching it.
It's not important and it's not necessary, but it's damn nice. You know, even just the thing looking nicer so you feel more in the groove of the afternoon.
I'm sure it's nice to be able to use the camera as it was intended, because obviously most of these cameras are used to be handled. There's a grip on it for a reason.
Oh yeah, you're in a different case because it's tripoded up, but even just going aesthetically, mate, wouldn't you love to, well, like not knocking Sony, but I find their design a little bit dry. It's a very industrial modern take on things. How much are you going to enjoy your day, even if it or your shoot? Let's say it's even 5% more, but that's 5% more towards awesome. If the thing has a Hasselblad styling instead of a Sony styling, don't you just feel a little more groovy knowing that it's got that nice retro feel and it's just adding a little class to the air? I know it's only aesthetic; it's not about the image at
Yeah,
all,
I
but
agree. Yeah, there's something there. There's something there, but I like I've used um, an EOS R, which isn't the best camera in the world,
that's a
right?
fairly modern industrial design too. Yeah,
Right? Pretty modern, mirrorless. It's competent,
yeah.
right? Very, very, very competent, but it's not in any way got the Leica feel or the Hasselblad feel,
No,
right?
with all
But
due respect. Yeah,
I shot an amazing set of images from that camera, and now for some reason, because of that, um, Canon R system is it, I favor a lot
hmm,
because of those that set of imagery. Uh, but I have yet to have made a similar set of imagery from any Fuji camera, and I know the Fujis are equally, if not more, competent. And I'm talking the medium formats. I'm not talking about the X series. I'm talking
yeah,
about I've shot with three GFXs,
yeah.
um, and each time the results are just I haven't felt the same as the EOS R set. So I have still yet to make an image from any GFX that would make me feel the same way as I do for the EOS R,
Sure.
right?
Would have
And
you have you
that day
figured?
will come, I'm
Yeah.
sure. But until it does, right now the EOS R just has a more special place in my heart. Even though I know from a specs point of view, it's a much lesser camera than any GFX.
Huh. And is it something you can quantify? Is it something in the image quality, in the aesthetic of it?
No, it's totally creative. It's just that I just haven't yet, and I know this day will come, haven't yet made a set of imagery where I just thought like, wow, this is a really nice project, right? So, and I just need to be able to attribute it back to a specific camera.
Yeah.
So I've made tons of amazing, what I think are amazing projects from the Phase One and the Hasselblads, tons of them.
Yeah.
That those two brands totally I feel very comfortable with, right? But just somehow not yet with the Fuji. And I really want the Fuji to give me that same type of imagery, um,
Huh.
because in the looking into the future, it seems like Fuji is the best bang for the buck. So I really want to be able to invest in that system at some point.
You want to
But
love it,
right
sure.
now, the images that I've been getting based on the rentals are just not inspiring me yet.
Hmm.
Yeah. So if you told me that I'm gonna buy a medium format system today with uh and I only have enough money to buy the Fuji, I won't feel confident buying the Fuji.
You'll buy the Canon and some spare lenses.
I might, or I might just save up and buy the Hasselblad.
Huh.
Yeah. Even if I had enough to buy the Fuji. It's weird.
That's something interesting. I'd like to explore that, but I feel then we're going to start getting to another hour, and we've already gone two, so it's 3 in the morning for you in Hong Kong. I don't want to push you too far. Yeah, yeah. For you audio folk, Michael is doing the choppy chop, let's wrap it up thing. But he's, mate, I think it's been worth it. This is not delved nearly enough into your story, but we've covered a lot of ground for the photo nerds out there. And that's part of what I like to do on the show because I'm a card carrying member, as you know. So,
Well, I think this leaves open discussion for another round sometime. If you want to do it, Andy, I'm totally open for it. I think I had a great time. So yeah, that we just know that there's more to talk about.
that's it, man. I was gonna say this just means you have to come back and we'll do it all over again with another topic and a little more of you.
Sure, no problem.
Easy deal. And that means you can get off to sleep even though you're in night cycle right now, processing work through your editor and all that, which is something definitely we'll cover as part of our next chit chat sometime, Michael.
Well, I just checked my email. There's no new revisions coming in, so I probably don't expect it for another few hours actually. So I'm good.
Okay, so you should get some bed then. You got to sleep
Yeah,
in between all this
some
photo
shower,
magic.
some bed, some corgi cuddles.
Corgi cuddles are smart. That's got to
Yeah,
be therapy in between.
yeah. So we're all good. But yeah, thanks for this, Andy. It was great. We talked a lot about it, and I'm glad that we eventually found a way to do it.
Yeah, man, and I knew you'd give quality talk. I've heard you enough on Clubhouse. Hey, the only thing that I have to ask you on the way out the door is what I ask every single person who's dropped by the podcast, and also when I'm photo tour version now on Clubhouse. I asked you this just today. So, mate, long or short, how do you feel about your photography?
Oh, well, like I said, it really depends on what camera I'm using. But yeah, overall, I mean, I think I just took a look at my work today over the past year compared to last year and compared to the year before, and I say that it's changed, and it changed in a very natural way. So much so that I didn't really notice until I looked at it overall as a whole, Lightroom library. So it's good. I like the direction that it's going. I like that it's not focused only on one thing anymore. It's opening up to combining other genres into what I do, which I think is quite interesting. So yeah, I'm glad of what's going on with that, and I still have plans to push it further into different areas. So yeah, all looking good.
Nice. Nice. There is no wrong answer, and that's definitely sounding like a right one. There's a little bit of metaphysical weirdness for you at 3 in the morning Hong Kong time. I hope it makes sense of that, brother.
Well, it's 3:30, but it feels more like probably 10 p.m. That's really what it feels like because I'm up late right now just because of the time zone shift that I have to do to synchronize with my retoucher.
Yeah.
But usually we work until about 6 a.m. my time, which is still another few hours away. So right now I'm still wide awake, right? I just sometimes I'm on Clubhouse, and if I'm in a boring room, then I start to feel sleepy. But if I'm talking to you on, live video and stuff like that, then I'm much more awake and alert. So yeah, so thanks for keeping me awake as well.
Hey, my pleasure, man. You were awake and alert during the chit chat, especially as we veered around. You've
Yeah,
successfully escaped talking about you too. Good work. Just means you're gonna have to come back, brother.
sure, sure. Yeah, I can talk more about me next time.
Please do. Please do. Oh, and until then, just on the way out the door, remind us where people can find you. Where would you like to plug without any mercy or restraint whatsoever, brother?
Oh, okay. Sure. I'll give you all my URLs. My website is Mixphoto. That's MIGSFOTO.com. Instagram is Mixphoto, MIGSFOTO and Clubhouse is just Michael Lee. I think there's a handle. I can't remember it though. But look for Andy, and then if you find me through Andy, I think that would work. YouTube channel is the Photography Rebuttal. And what else is there? Don't worry about Facebook. who uses Facebook anymore anyway? So,
We're all on Clubhouse now.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's it. Yeah. So thanks, Andy.
Hey, my pleasure, brother. And I'll do you one better than people having to dig around my bio. I'll link directly to your Clubhouse so people can catch up with you there nice and easy.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks a lot.
And there you have it, my friends. A nice little chit-chat, gibble-gabble, blah-blah with Michael Lee over in Hong Kong, sharing his gems of wisdom, as is appreciated here on That Photo Feeling. And I gave it back, I hope, in reasonable degree without cutting the guy off too much. You know, to nudge the conversation forward, to make it a good chit-chat, to do what we do here on That Photo Feeling. So, don't forget to check out Michael's work. If you enjoyed, links are in the description, and we covered it at the end of the chit-chat with him. And what do I got to say from there, friends? A little weekly update from Andy is pretty brief this week, except for, oh my, that's right, I got myself my MacBook. Nice little MacBook Air with an M1 chip with 16 gigs of memory. Mine. Oh, even got a leather case. Mostly leather. Let's call it mostly leather. So that's the biggest update I can share on my side of things, my friends. I'm really just super happy to finally have this thing on hand. We have a laptop here at Andy Central. However, it has essentially aged out. 11 years for the last MacBook Pro is pretty substantial, and you can only really take it so far, especially as you're starting to put together books, podcasts, all the stuff I do as Andy McSweeney Photography and or Photo Tour Bruges. So this new little purchase in my life, of which I am so grateful that we were able to afford on this tough year. Thank you, Belgium, for that 25% rebate on the taxes to come. Yeah, it really is opening things up. I think you're going to see it a little more, especially on the web side of things, because I am about to launch another version of Andy McSweeney Photography's website and tweak up Photo Tour Bruges a little bit over summer. And yeah, I don't have to do it at the desk. I can sit in a beautiful open park here in my beautiful open city of Bruges in this beautiful open weather that is coming and going a little bit right now in Belgium, but leaning towards sunshine at least more than once. And as I see life and activity take over and start to really fire up proper after this tricky year and a half as far as normal life goes, I'm really looking forward to this, boys and girls. That's all I got to say about that, and I wish I had another level of deep wisdom to share with you on that. But I'm just hyped I can get away from the desk for a little bit over summer. So, having said that, why don't we wrap things up so I can get away from the desk and sit in that beautiful park in my beautiful city. I'm Andy McSweeney of Andy McSweeney Photography and Photo Tour Bruges, also of That Photo Feeling, this podcast, this weekly show I do, and my club on Clubhouse. If you happen to roll around that corner of things, feel free to click the links and you can discover it all. And if you enjoyed this, boys and girls, please don't forget to share. Let someone know that Andy's doing a decent show out here with That Photo Feeling. And that's all I got to say about that, as far as just reminding you it really makes a big difference. So, having said all that and plugged the like, share, subscribe thing at the end of the show, let's get out of here. Boys and girls, it is that time. Get out there and get shooting. See ya.